Flyover Footy here for another Thursday night edition. I think the only thing on our agenda, Phil, is Yeti Cups.
Yeah, I think that's going to come up in the wind down.
Yeah, I think we should just probably open and spend the first portion of KTRS on Yeti Cups. It's kind of what everybody just cares about right now. Might as well go around the horn of the fan base.
You know, the important stuff that came
Right.
out this week in the news.
Right. I mean, I suppose we have a match, but at the same time, Yeti Cups are dominating the news cycle, so you might as well stay relevant.
And actually, not that I was going to say this sarcastically, but honestly, there may be a point to this. But, you know, who cares about new MLS roster rules?
When you have Yeti Cups, I mean, like, is this an in comparison thing?
Like I said, I was going to say it sarcastically, but to some extent, like maybe I get far too worked up about it.
I mean, I'm a roster rule nerd. I was just kind of, I don't know if you got a chance to see that Yeti Cup conversation go like live as people are tweeting about stuff, but
No,
it really was a circle. You know
I've told you I've curated my Twitter to like a very good degree. I don't get much of the BS.
Well done. Well done for that.
Yeah, Blown Boys, you're right on the edge there, bud. You better. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I hate it. So
every single one of the novelty accounts, I'll say, have their own. Like they all push the envelope in certain ways at certain times.
Oh Lord. Okay, well, it's a good week for me to be late because I mean you're gonna be doing most of the heavy lifting, so I'm gonna hit record and we'll get going.
Sounds good.
Welcome everyone to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS. We are presented by Noble Ice Vineyards, our new sponsor. We are so happy and thrilled to be a part of the show. It's a big week. This week, we're going to talk to you guys a lot in this KTRS version of our show about Austin and the game coming up. And we're going to prepare you for all that. But there is a podcast and a lot of news has come out this week. We've got important news, very, specific MLS rules news for the nerds. And I think we've got some drama. If you just want to, tune in for your Bravo TV style drama. We've got some Yeti Cup conversation coming in the wind down, and that's only found on the podcast. So please do join us on the podcast if you enjoy what you hear tonight in the radio portion on the Big 550 KTRS. My friend here today, like I just said, is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting tonight as far as presenting Austin FC and telling you what they're going to be like, what St. Louis is going to do, and a lot of those MLS rules. That's your specialty, Matt. How's it going, man?
Great. Good week. Excited to be back. Excited to have this match this weekend. Excited to be talking about St. Louis City because it has been an interesting week, an interesting day as we're recording this on Thursday, and there's a lot to get into. So do you want to just jump right into updates on the players?
Player availability updates. It's my favorite part of the show now.
Good news, bad news, but I would say overall bad news as far as this weekend goes. We saw the return of Joakim Nilsson and Edu Leuven to training on Wednesday. We got to see a little bit of their availability. The media portion, we saw them as neutrals. And so when they play on the field, they were doing their drills. They were in the middle of the field, not playing offense, not playing defense, kind of not going full speed. They were on with the team. It was no contact type thing. But Edu Leuven and Joakim Nilsson both returned to training. Bradley Carnell's only comment on both of them playing this weekend was, "We'll have to see." There's a press conference on Friday, and by the time you're listening to this on the Big 550 KTRS, you'll know their availability, but it's early for those two. This is the first time they've returned to training team activities since their injuries, Joakim Nilsson, Edu Leuven, and since Leuven stepped away from the team for a little bit for his personal reasons. So good news on that. They're trending positively. On the other side of this, Josh Yaro and Jabulu Blom. Josh Yaro is out for at least 4 weeks after re-aggravating his hamstring injury against FC Dallas, and Jabulu Blom is out from 2 to 4 weeks with an injury that, as of right now, is undisclosed, but he had previously said he was 100% fit after his knee injury. It was notable that he did seem to limp or walk off gingerly against the FC Dallas, and Bradley Carnell said that he did pick up some injury in that game. So blow him out 2 to 4 weeks. We don't know yet what the cause of that is. I think it's presumptuous to assume the knee at this point. But regardless, we're now out likely 2 center backs. We're out 2 midfielders, and we have questions in our finish. So the rest of this pod is going to be fascinating in how we make up for those few things.
That's well said. Do you feel like our center backs are just like a gradient of health at this point, and some of them are just barely on the healthy side of things, and they're kind of rotating in and out? It seems like they just get barely healthy enough while someone else kind of, wears themselves kind of thin, and seems like Yaro's on the thin side right now as Nilsson is about to maybe step up.
Boy, it's hard to analyze. I mean, you could draw some of these like qualitative conclusions of it's just a rotating list of guys going to the hospital, because at one point in this season, every single signed center back has been hurt. Tim Parker missed time, Joakim Nilsson, obviously, Josh Yaro right now, and Kyle Hebert missed time earlier with a knee injury. So every single center back by trade has been injured. This is a problem that we never expected to have to deal with, especially after last year's center back depth that we constantly talked about. Michael Wenzel might find himself being signed out of necessity at this point here pretty soon. But I do have concerns because the center back position is so vital to what St. Louis does. The high press nature, moving the wing backs up, puts so much stress on our center backs. And so they're asked to do so much so often. And to have them right on the precipice so many times, whether it's a Parker back issue, knees, hamstrings, it's worrisome as we're carrying these into just the second block of games that City is playing. So not even a third of the way done with the season, and we're dealing with all of these center back injuries. I guess the silver lining is you're having some of these guys return. So Joakim Nilsson, Edu Leuven, both on the horizon to return. If not against Austin or Kansas City, then we have a quote unquote bye week on the other side of that. So you could make an argument things are trending up.
Well, and we are seeing now, I haven't felt super confident in Josh Yaro until like 2 games ago. And I feel like he's really stepped up, and maybe getting so much game play time has given him that experience that he just needed to step up to the next level. I think Ostrak in the last game took a major step forward in that center midfield position that Leuven has vacated. And so maybe this has, a silver lining in that some of our middle of the block there players are becoming good enough to maybe push for starting roles, even as their, very talented counterparts come in here. There's a quote here that I want you to kind of help me with, because it looks interesting and I didn't see it on Twitter. On the training field, they added an additional couple lines to, quote, just helps us on and against the ball to set up shapes. What is that from?
I've learned, and having the honor and taking the time to go to training, I've learned not to give away all of my secrets on Twitter. It's a thing I did a lot last year, but I've kept a few in our back pocket just for the podcast for flyover. But we noticed, Tom Timmerman and I noticed this, Jen Cease was there as well, that on the training field, we have 2 grass fields and we have a turf field. And the 2 grass fields, there have been additional lines that have been marked over the past couple of weeks. And these are lines that have divided the field up vertically into channels. So you've got your wings, you've got your half spaces, and you have your center, right? And it seems like, and it was confirmed by Bradley Carnell, that there was an additional couple of lines that were created on the wings to, quote, just helps us on and against the ball to set up shapes. And I found this fascinating as I re-listened to some of the things Carnell told us on the Wednesday press conference, or Wednesday training rather, not the official press conference, where he was mentioning, and we'll talk about it, a little more intentionality in the final third and being a little more cognizant of their spacing, not having it be so just not like full on dynamic, because that's how City runs in their attacking third often, is they just go all over the place. It's everybody moving all over the field. And I think some of the problems that we've seen in the past few weeks, as far as finishing the chances that are created, have to do with the spacing in the final third. And so starting to see, okay, you're making more lines on the field that you're training with. And some of the comments that we're going to talk about, what Carnell says about AZ and Klaus, you can kind of easily see the narrative of what Carnell's trying to instill upon these guys in being a little more intentional with what they're doing in the final third. And it's very clear to see that there's an evolution occurring in what he's trying to get across in the St. Louis City attack.
As a former marching band player, musician, I can appreciate some reference lines on the field. I think it's helpful when you're trying to do certain things on the field, trying to coordinate people into doing certain things. Good stuff there. And I even noticed, I think there was a horizontal line early first season, preseason
Mhm.
that was there that I'm sure for different reasons, but I don't know. I like it. I think that's a good thing. It can't hurt. I think it's a good tool for training. What would I know though? I enjoy it. Good little tidbit there, Matt. Let's talk about a little bit about St. Louis and Austin, about where they stand in the standings, kind of give us a shape to kind of build on here.
Yeah, let's get into the preview in earnest. St. Louis City comes into this matchup 11th in the West with a 1-1-5 record, 8 points and a 0 goal differential, scoring and allowing 11 goals. Their form in the last 3 games, they drew DC at home 2-2, they lost 3-1 to RSL, and they drew FC Dallas last week 0-0. Aside from the 27 shots against FC Dallas with no goals, they've also only had 1 goal in their last 3 games that's come from the run of play. There were moments last year where you had stretches where you're tracking this as well, and it was concerning, and you're looking for momentum to pick up that you can build off of. But in the past 3 games, we've had 1 corner, 1 PK against DCU, and Indiana Vasilev's 3-minute shot against RSL, and that's been it. So 1 goal in the run of play in the past 3 games is a problem for St. Louis, and that's what they're carrying into this game, trying to get off of their shoulders. Austin FC, on the other hand, sitting right now 8th in the West on a 2-2-3 record with 9 points, just 1 more point than St. Louis City, 11 goals scored, 12 goals against, and they're 0-1-1 on the road. Their form in the last 3 games, though, is where they become dangerous. They lost to Orlando on the road 2-0, and then they defeated FC Dallas 2-1, that same team that we couldn't score against, at home. And then last week, they defeated the San Jose Earthquake 4-3 I talked about it on our midweek show, my probably game of the week. This game had everything. It was exciting and it had late drama from the star of the show, and his name's going to come up a lot tonight, Sebastian Driussi. Sebastian Driussi made his return to the starting lineup against Orlando, but in the past 2 games with FC Dallas and San Jose, he's really picked up steam for them. They've really rounded into form with him, and all of the jokes, all of the slander and making fun of Austin for their lack of shot producing capabilities in the first few games has completely gone by the wayside. They started off 0-2-3. Driussi was on the bench versus St. Louis. He started versus Orlando, like I said. But in the last 2 matches that he's had and started in, he's had 2 goals, 1 assist. He individually has had 9 shots taken and 4 key passes, including the match winner at 90 plus 11 against San Jose. So this guy is returning from injury. He's rounding into form like his MVP season a few years ago, and he's being the dangerous player that they need to coalesce around, that they've really built their team around. So if you're looking at what kind of form they're in, you just point at Sebastian Driussi and say, this is why they're dangerous right now.
Yeah, Austin definitely, maybe not in the first year, but since they've kind of dropped, Driussi is that ace in the hole. He is that ringer. They rely on him to really be the main guy. I think you've laid it out perfectly there. That obviously he is. He's filling that role for them right now. Matt, quickly, like, do we? It's interesting to see the goal differential between the 2 teams, St. Louis and Austin, and to see where we sit in the standings. Well, how do you feel about all of that? The fact that we're 11th, St. Louis is 11th right now, Austin's 8th. Austin was supposed to be pretty bad, and not that St. Louis hasn't gotten its fair share of hate as well in the offseason. What do you feel about it right now?
I think St. Louis has yet to really find themselves between the injuries they've had to the back line, to the midfield, the ineffectiveness of finishing from guys that we're relying on. That say, if as Klaus or Sam go, so go St. Louis, that kind of a thing. And Austin has just had to deal with one key injury to Sebastian Driussi. They've had some other issues, and they've had an inability to really find a way to gel with Jossie Zardes and with Diego Rubio. But Sebastian Driussi pulls it all together. And when he's in the lineup, they're so massively different, and everybody plays better with him in. He's able to draw defenders away from the wings, allowing them space, like Javier Obrian. Like, he can find so much
Mm.
space to work in with Sebastian Driussi in the lineup. And there was a goal that Driussi scored. I mean, the way that he's able to just control the ball with his feet and find space is kind of scary in the way St. Louis allows goals. So I'm looking back on this now, wondering what Austin FC was so concerned about early in the season if Sebastian Driussi was healthy, because the way they've played the past couple games, this is a team that had he been healthy the whole season, is likely fighting for contention with Vancouver and the LA Galaxy for top of the West.
Really interesting. I did hear too that he is less of a finisher now, and he is more of you know, a passer and
He's a
coordinating the
yeah,
field,
sure.
facilitator. Thank you. So
Yeah.
sorry. Almost maybe what Klaus has been asked to do in some ways, since Leuven's been out, but who knows if
Yeah.
that's a good comp there. Let's hear some more about Austin, Matt. Keep going.
I look at the last time these two teams played as, okay, what happened last time? And because both teams were in a different position. And so there's a lot that can be said about last season in the number of goals that were scored and just the way that these two teams played. But even last game, where Austin was coming off 2 matches, producing 11 total shots against St. Louis, giving up possession, wanting St. Louis to beat them on the ball, giving St. Louis 59% possession, St. Louis outshooting them 16-5 and 6-2 on target. I see these numbers and I think, okay, these were different teams. Going into this match, both teams have to prove different things, and they're coming in very different circumstances. So the way that St. Louis was able to score last time with the PK and with Salio doing his 90+3 heroics, it was kind of, at the time, emblematic of both of those teams. Austin was struggling to keep leads. Austin was struggling to win. St. Louis was fighting back from behind. They were playing well enough to earn draws on the road, type of a thing. The last time we also had replacement refs, so maybe that played into it to an extent. But there's just I look at even the last time we played as, you can't judge too much because of how much of a different circumstance these teams are in. You weren't desperate for finishing at the time from St. Louis. Austin didn't have their key playmakers. So much differences back and forth that you look to this as kind of a whole different ball game, despite the fact that these teams just played like a month ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, I was not prepared to move on here, Matt. But why don't we kick right into the keynotes about STL? We've got a whole lot to move on to, so let's move into that.
Yeah, this is one of those games where you know what you're worried about with Austin. And we'll get into plenty of stats about what Austin has to offer and provide, but I look to St. Louis as the team that can control their own destiny, not just because they're at home, but because of how well they played and how well they created chances against FC Dallas. It's now to the point where we know the problem. The problem is you have to put the ball in the net. You're getting the ball into the places where you should be putting the ball into the net. You're moving the ball up the field effectively in various ways, whether it's against a low block, a mid block, or a pressing team. You're finding ways around that. There's only been, I think, one match this year where it's been abysmal in our chance creation, and that was Real Salt Lake. But outside of that, Bradley Carnell on Wednesday talked about some incredible stats in FC Dallas, the number of balls into the box, the pass entries into the final third, the possession numbers. He kept referencing it as incredible, talking about how often the team was in the attacking third, controlling the ball against a team like FC Dallas and pressing to earn the ball back, not just being sent the ball by Dallas because they didn't want it, but St. Louis was taking everything that they earned and got as far as chance creation went in that game. Carnell says now we need to find ways to get the ball across the line, and that's a lot of the emphasis this week, but no need for unnecessary panic. And so how are they working on that? Carnell says little movements, little combinations, relationships in the box. We put out a saying, and I like this, Phil. This one says, Carnell said, if everyone wants to score a goal, no one will. Everyone's trying to their best to put themselves in the best spot to get those relationships polished. So and Carnell also mentioned Seattle, Portland, Minnesota, as far as running into roadblocks, needing to find something new last season, and kind of what they're going through right now. And so to hear Carnell say they're working on it, not just with little movements, little combinations, but reinforcing that if everybody wants to score a goal, nobody will. You have to play as a team, deliver the ball to those who are responsible and putting themselves in position to shoot, and everybody has a role to play. There's some things that he said about AZ Jackson and Klaus in particular that are fascinating, but this is kind of the basis for everything. It's the reinforcing the principles, and he loves his principles, but reinforcing, he says, that everybody has a job to do, and there's goal scorers, and then there's people who facilitate for them, and knowing what your role is just as important as scoring the goal at the end of the day.
We're Flyover Footy on the big 550 KTRS presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Matt, I love those comments, and I've been watching these stats that you list them off every week. So this is nothing new to people who listen to Flyover Footy. Mm-hmm. But these stats that Carnell are mentioning, I'm not terribly worried because those things I feel like are harder than finishing, only because we have someone like Klaus, who last year, and even in signs before last year with City 2, just showed his quality. A lot of MLS teams, they're talking about it over and over on shows like Extra Time,
Mhm.
Backheeled, talking about how hard it's been this year to get a true nine, like a goal scoring nine. And there are several teams kind of making do with, a 9.5, like like we did with Joe Aquini kind of last year. And it's not an ideal situation for them. It's not their first choice. It looks like LAFC might be waiting around for Giroud. Those kind of things are going around the league. But we have a nine. We have Klaus. Um, we have what is wrong with me today? My mind is not
Sam?
working. Sam Adeniran, my goodness. We got Sam, and yeah, these guys haven't, gotten their finishing boots on quite yet, or maybe Sam's slumping from a really good start. But the fact that the ball is getting in those areas, like you just said, I feel like I'm not terribly worried, but it is scary that those things are happening without the goals. It reminds me of a lot of like Berhalter early USMNT quotes, saying it's good. They're going to come. Like, look at the XG this week. Those kind of things were being said a lot, but it did come eventually. I don't know if that's a similar situation or not, though.
It probably is. And if you're of that mindset and you're thinking how well you're playing holistically in getting the ball into the positions to shoot and have high or low percent, but you have the volume where you should be scoring goals. Klaus even says any game where you're creating 27 shots, you'd expect at least 2 goals to come from that. But you also had Austin, who scored twice off 3 shots the last time they played. Klaus
Yeah.
mentioned that on Wednesday to us, and he's right. Sometimes the ball just doesn't drop. And here's the thing to think about for City, and this is the really tough thing as a fan, but also seeing the fan base be so uh, just not patient in wanting this to happen because they've
Yeah.
seen it. So we've seen what can happen when these guys are in form. We know it's there. The fact that you're being so successful in 90% of the field and then you can't finish. So what's the solution to doing that? And it's tough if you're looking at mixing and matching the lineup, because Bradley Carnell said, like the quote earlier, you don't want to mess with too much. You can't, you're not going to blow up the system because of an inability to finish if you're being so successful at generating chances for the finishing. So then the question for me becomes, what does it mean to fix the finishing for St. Louis City? And it can be argued that it starts with a guy like AZ Jackson, or at least the position around AZ Jackson. I think he's taken the brunt of the flack from and criticism from fans, because you can look at just about every single person on the field and say, okay, you did a great job at chance creation in one way, shape, or form in this part of the field. But AZ, for some reason, is getting a whole lot of this criticism put on his shoulders, I think. I don't know if it's unnecessary or not, but here's what Bradley Carnell had to say when I asked him on Wednesday specifically about AZ, and if there's anything, how he sees AZ's performance on the field, and if there's anything he needs to work on going forward. And Carnell said, quote, "The challenge for any 10, you're recorded on how many goals you score, passes you make for assists, but AZ puts in a ton of work against the ball. He's one of the best counter pressers in the league. He's really dangerous at picking up balls between the lines, whether it's Parker, one of the sixes like Dirks, they all shove balls in and he takes them on elegantly. And he gets the next pass off. So now we look at how we can reward him." And then Carnell's talking about the finishing, the spacing. I think this plays back into those lines on the training field, as rudimentary as that may be, but just trying to reinforce some of the spacing issues that St. Louis had, and how they could get AZ more involved to the point where they're rewarding him for all of the work that he's doing between the lines. The two-way player that he's being, it's just not resulting in some of the finishing. So to that end, we spoke with Klaus on Wednesday, and Klaus had to say that it was basically all mental. Klaus said, "I think it's more mental. If you start to go down and think, oh, why is my ball not going in? Why am I not scoring goals? Then you stop helping the team in other ways as well. You get too laser focused. You have to see if you made bad decisions or if you made good decisions and you just didn't score." Klaus called out a couple shots that he took against FC Dallas that either hit the crossbar, they were saved by Martin Paz, and he just reiterated that the goals will come. So I think this is more trying to figure out where your mind is in making those last shots, because it can be called a cascade effect from either way, whether it's the work you're doing to get the ball up and get those shots off, or if a shot goes in then it's kind of that sigh of relief and the confidence will come. The momentum might follow, but you're rewarding players and you're reinforcing all of that good work that they're doing so that they don't try to do anything different or outside of themselves.
Well, and to be clear, Matt, I think you're directly not attacking, but like speaking to the people that are just sick of AZ. I don't know how many times I've seen the tweets out there saying, stop starting AZ. And to be fair, you and I have taken him out of our projected lineups to some degree here and there. And I don't know, like, I'm looking at some XG stats here, and, expected assisted goals for AZ is 0.8. That's not bad in 514 minutes, so like 5 games or so worth of time played. It's not amazing. It's not, top of the league stats. Looking at non-penalty XG for Klaus, 1.6. So on one side, I'm thinking, they're doing things right. Especially Klaus has put some really nice shots on goal that have been stopped very nicely by goalkeepers. So I feel like in some ways I just need maybe get that baseball mentality. It's a long season. You just keep putting in the work. You keep putting those shots on goal, and they're going to start going in. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of statistical time, and things are going to fix themselves. The goals are going to go in for Klaus. Do we feel that way about Ezeal Jackson? There's, one parallel I came up with this week that I was like, man, this is perfect, because Brendan Aronson is hated. He was hated by Philly fans even before he was transferred out to Leeds, where Leeds fans complained about him. And now we're seeing hate from Union Berlin fans. And it's just AZ. He puts in all that work. He causes massive chaos between the lines. And some of these times he's going to get those turnovers, make a pass, and we're going to get a goal. But that doesn't necessarily show up in the style of XG that people like in underlying stats. So far, the pass before the goal, the assist hasn't been there from him. We had an amazing one in preseason that I will never forget, because I thought maybe he turned the page. We haven't seen that in the regular season yet, but it's just like Brendan Aronson. He causes chaos. We don't see the beautiful pass in games as often as we'd like. We keep thinking they're going to turn that page. And Matt, I just, all those thoughts combined, like, is it baseball? Is it a matter of time? Are things going to get worked out? Are we okay with AZ being this man forever, like Brendan Aronson clearly is, right? Or, do we think something's gonna click and he's gonna get, more pretty a player, or more evidently, obviously, clearly the assist leader of St. Louis City, or maybe second to Leuven at worst, moving forward, someone maybe contending for assist leaders in the league in the near future? What do you think? And does it matter either way?
I mean, it matters to the extent that if he's going to be in the lineup consistently, we need him to assist with some of the goals, whether it's directly or indirectly, whether he's awarded an assist or not. There is the one thing that I have said in the past few weeks that I think is shared by a lot is that he does run into traffic. And Carnell mentioned this a little bit, that, when he's getting in those positions centrally, it's not that I don't know that it's his decision making it's too slow, or that he's not making a move a little quicker than he should, but he does hold on to the ball to the point where he is swarmed a little bit. And that also happens to Klaus. I asked Klaus on Wednesday, what do you like? You're getting in these positions in the box where you're coming back towards the ball, you're coming in deeper, and suddenly there's 3 or 4 players around you. How do you fix that? What do you need to do to make that a better position for you, whether it's you laying the ball off or you just not being swarmed in general? And his first thing he said was there has to be more people in the box, crashing the box, having these runs in behind him or around him, but there has to be more of a direct to goalness, and not playing outside of the box to allow yourself to have these defenders step up into you. And I do think I noticed a few times that, especially against FC Dallas, Klaus would come back to the ball, and then there would be nobody running in higher up than him. It would be, you'd have Tomas Ostrak or AZ Jackson running horizontally behind him. It was almost like a basketball play, like a give and go, but there was no go after the give. And I don't know if you can say that Klaus needed to have more movement off the ball once he laid it off to AZ or Ostrak, but it was almost like they never wanted to push it that last bit. And Ostrak had a lot of shots outside of the box. Ostrak played a great game, but he did have a lot of shots outside the box. And I wonder if there could have been one more pass that was played to Klaus if he's maybe found on a cross or just a small pass in the air. But something isn't clicking in that last little phase when they're drawing pressure onto themselves. And then if 3 or 4 guys are collapsing onto a Klaus or an AZ, somebody is open. And I'm reminded back when we scored that the Salio scored the game-tying goal against Austin last time. If you remember that, it was Thomas Totland who had the assist, and it was because we were collapsing on the right side so hard. I think Rasmus Alm was in the game at that time. We were collapsing so hard on the right side, drawing the defenders over to us, and Salio had space. So that little switch that occurred in the attacking third, Salio had space to, and it wasn't even a pretty shot. It was kind of a dink shot, but the space was there to find net. And that's the kind of thing I think we need to be more clinical on, is creating the overloads in the final third. So it's not just putting Klaus on an island or expecting AZ to run between the lines that connects things and suddenly you're being swarmed one way or another. You have to be able to make these quick passes. And that's where our specialty of leveraging the wings can really play into our advantage. If we can do these overloads in the final third on the wings, it spreads Austin. It spreads every team so far wide that it creates that space that AZ, Klaus, and even Salio need to work with.
Yeah, I think guys moving into space actually, I think is pretty good. That's the kind of players we got. We're happy to make runs, happy to push and press and that kind of thing. But do we have guys creating space? That's harder. I mean, Chris Gebhardt said, as you were saying, that Celio had to get used to moving the ball more quickly, which he did after coming back from City 2. He just thinks AZ needs to be quicker with his decisions distribution. I kind of agree with that, but Celio's one of the few people that are drawing multiple defenders, beating people, creating that chaos in space that other people can get into. And it's really nice, Matt, that I'm glad you brought up that wing play, because I hadn't been noticing that quite as much. You're really good at noticing those overloads on one side. So I need to listen to you more for that. But, you know, I think that's more likely to happen than we just don't have players that are just intricate, tight space players. That's not what they were brought here to do. And that's why piling guys in the box makes sense for defenses. Like, look what Dallas did. It was second half was disgusting to watch. But Celio created some bright moments because of that. And I thought Sam should have come on sooner because he's able to do more with that as well.
Oh, yeah.
But lastly, Manuel Vaith once again brought up Cedric Tukert, the possible striker we could sign from Hannover 96. There's a lot of other guys. Does St. Louis bring in someone who's good in tight places? I think Thorson is good at positioning in tight places, but can we get him the ball? Can we open up space to get the ball to him for that finish that I think he's good at? Maybe the next player who comes in is going to be a striker or an attacking mid or a winger who can do well in tight spaces, because I think we've seen that Leuven's not that guy, right, either.
That's another thing, is everybody has their specialty. Like Sam, like we've talked with Klaus, and Sam's even mentioned they've both said how different of a player they were. We talked to Salio last week, who said that his service to Klaus varies vastly between what he offers to Sam, just because he knows the type of player they are. Everybody's aware of these, so they know if you see Sam in the game, you know the offense is going to be playing him different balls than they would be playing to Klaus. Like it's the same principles, if this makes sense, in how you're progressing the ball and what you're trying to do with the ball, but in your deliverance to your striker, you're looking for different things because they're positioning themselves differently. Klaus is coming back to the ball. He's looking for a header or a run between the center backs in the box. Sam is going to make that run wide. He's going to go 1v1, look to cut in from a half space position to net. You're using his speed to your advantage, whereas you're not using Klaus's speed, because Klaus even acknowledges he's not as fast as Sam. And so when you're looking at what the most successful lineup is and how you can take advantage of your two strikers, those are considerations. And matchup based, which one matches up better against Austin? You could make an argument, I think, either way, given the fact that, you know, they have two strong center backs, you know, Matt Hedges and I think Julio Cascante, good center backs that they played us well in the first game. Knut Thorson is a really good second striker who makes runs in from the wings, finds space as he cuts in more direct to goal. Like, we haven't seen much of it this year outside of preseason, but he's really good as a second striker or left winger who can then invert and come in to find the space. If you create space, Thorson's going to take that space up to receive a pass. We just haven't seen and haven't had a whole lot of opportunity, I think, because we're working so much with Klaus and Sam, not unlike earlier last season when Sam couldn't find time because it was Klaus and Gioacchini.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you indulging me with some of these ethereal conversations, Matt. It's been really fun to kind of think about these things that I think a lot of people are addressing on Twitter right now. So I hope everyone is enjoying that conversation. We're not giving proof by any means. We're just joining you in the thoughts and prayers for St. Louis City and their finishing. But Matt, let's get back to some statistics. I'd like you to just take us wherever you would like to finish this show with like another 5 or 10 minutes here of statistical stuff.
Yeah, let's look at the teams because we talked about Driussi being the player for Austin to watch. The stats for St. Louis have looked pretty similar the past couple of weeks. So if you're listening to us week to week, you know that Sam and Salio lead our team with 2 goals each, but we haven't been goal scoring. So none of that really seems as relevant right now. I want to look at the teams. There's a notion that St. Louis has looked markedly different because and you can make arguments because teams have played us differently. DC United was a high press team to us. They were giving us possession. RSL the opposite. You had this past week against FC Dallas where we were taking the ball. So possession numbers for St. Louis are fascinating to me this season. Here's the possession numbers game by game: 40%, 45%, 59%, 34%, 57%, 43%, and 66%. This is a legitimate roller coaster up and down every single game. So it's not surprising when you're asking, what is St. Louis's true identity right now? Is this still the high press counterattacking team? Is this the transition team that's dangerous? Or is this team trying too much to possess the ball and to really add that extra element as opposed to using it as a change of pace? It's a legit argument because we've seen so many high possession games for St. Louis when we hadn't necessarily seen that last year. But if you look into the underlying numbers of how St. Louis is progressing the ball, it's still this quintessential St. Louis City team. We're still the second lowest in sequence time in MLS, the second fewest passes per sequence behind DC, the second quickest direct speed in MLS behind LAFC. And so the way that we're moving the ball up, yeah, we might possess the ball more, but how we're getting the ball from point A near Berkey up to point B near Klaus or Sam is still pretty similar. Like we're still leveraging those same principles. And that's reassuring, if nothing else, because for a team that's failing to finish, you need to see these underlying similarities to the style of play that you're used to. You need to see these success metrics in key passes and in all of these other things to know that this is still a team that understands their identity. Austin FC on the other side, they're 18th lowest in sequence time, 13th fewest passes per sequence, but their direct speed is the second slowest in the league. This tells me 3 things. They're not going to possess the ball for a large amount of time. They are middling in their quantity of passes, but they're not going to strike fast. Direct speed is important as it plays into the high pressing advantage that St. Louis has. And by Austin being the second slowest direct speed team, I think they're more susceptible, more prone to the pressing that St. Louis can offer. St. Louis is still the 4th lowest in PPDA, passes per defensive action. In fact, they gained 2 spots from last week because of how much they were pressing Dallas. So that's how many passes does the opposition make before St. Louis has a defensive action that they put on them. Austin's, though, is 6th lowest. So they've been pressing almost as much as St. Louis has, but this is going to be a focus for St. Louis and how they look to break the Austin press that comes at them. So knowing Austin likes to press, Austin won't possess for a large amount of time. Seeing how St. Louis manages this while at home is going to be fascinating. And then looking offensively, the 2 stats of the night that I look at are key passes and key pass types. Key passes are passes that lead directly to a shot. In this season, St. Louis has 88 total key passes. Austin has 38 total key passes. But in the last match, they had 9. And so they've played 7 matches, and 9 of their 38 have come in this last match. So that shows the result of Sebastian Driussi. You can make that easy argument that we made earlier that this is a different team with Sebastian Driussi. But how are they making some of these big passes? Well, St. Louis leads the league in crosses. Not surprising. We talked about how we like to play it up the wings. Thomas Totland, Anthony Marcanic led our team in touches last week. I would expect that to continue. With no Jabulu Blom, no Edu Leuven, you're looking at still action on our wings. Thomas Totland is going to be one of the key players to watch in how we progress and how we're able to stretch the field for Austin. But on the opposite side, Austin FC is 5th in the league in switches. Those are greater than 40 yard passes the width of the field. And so they're going to try the same thing, where if St. Louis tries to get numbers on a wing of the field, if they're pressing and they try to get overloads defensively to force pressure, be watching for Austin to switch it up. And that's going to play into their horizontal passing and what they're trying to do. My final thing on spacing and the St. Louis final third is Bradley Carnell. He said that regarding players trying to do too much individually, because I asked him a pointed question. I asked Bradley Carnell, when you're getting into these parts of the season and you're struggling to finish, are players feeling like they need to do too much? Do you have a concern that players are going to do too much, get outside themselves, and try to take the game on their shoulders? And Carnell said, honestly, these guys are such honest, hardworking guys that they try to do everything. And one area does get congested, and you have too many guys popping up in the same area. Everybody wants to do their maximum. It's good, but we've guided them with principles about which spots to target, where we want to go, and whose role and responsibility it is. So we're not putting it down to the randomness of the act in the box, talking about the final third. We're trying to be a little more predictable. And this sums up everything that I was saying earlier. This is my crescendo. Is Bradley Carnell saying we're trying to be a little more predictable? And that's not a bad thing. It's antithesis to the chaos of the concerns that St. Louis City fans have had about spacing being an issue in the final third by players running all over the place and trying to create things for themselves as opposed to playing together, cohesiveness, understanding what AZ's role is in any given situation compared to what Indiana Vassilev is going to be doing, or where Sam or Klaus are going to be on the field. Knowing whose role it is at any given point, where the ball is and where the defense is, can let you be more predictable to yourselves and to each other.
Yeah.
And that's the important part.
I'm glad you specified that, because we're not talking about being predictable in all of our aspects of play. They mean like at any moment you can get the ball and know that someone is doing a certain thing and send it their way, or same with pressing or any situation, I think, right? Isn't that kind of what you're getting at as well?
Exactly. Yeah. I think pressing is a good example because players know what their push points are. We've talked about push points a lot. If Klaus makes one move towards a center back, for instance, AZ knows where he needs to cover, or Indiana Vassilev knows the spot that he needs to be in to try and prevent that next pass, to make the defense uncomfortable in where they expect to be. That's why back passes were a thing last year, because we were so predictable in where we were pushing our press. And so being more predictable in the final third on the attack, on the offense, is just the exact same thing, but with the ball. So other players knowing where you're going to be and what your mindset is, what you know your role is, and where you need to be positionally to play off of that.
Yep, absolutely. And sequences of play, I mean, it's massive in every level of play. In fact, it works, right? People do it because it works, but some people are saying that sometimes you can get too rigid and things like that, even with academies and things like that. So it's there for a reason. Predictability, it's a good thing when you're trying to score in the final third.
I would argue, in fact, too, Phil, that another word for predictability as far as what we're talking about is muscle memory.
Yeah, agree.
If you know what you're supposed to be doing without even needing to think about it, and that allows you to be more predictable to each other internally to your team.
Completely agree. You're listening to Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Matt, I think it's time. I think we need to do our formations, and we're going to do a prediction this week. I kind of skipped over it last week. We were in a bit of a hurry, but we have some time today, and there's only two of us, so.
Yeah, so looking at Austin real quick, Austin, they ran a pretty similar lineup the past 2 weeks. I predict Austin, based on their past few games and what we've heard from our friends at We Are Austin TV, Brad Stuver in net, Hector Jimenez, Matt Hedges, Julio Cascante, and John Gallagher, their back line, Danny Pereira, Alexander Ring, their central midfield, Hadair Obrian, Sebastian Driussi, Owen Wolf makes up their attacking midfield, and then Diego Rubio. That's a 4-2-3-1 that I look for them to throw out to us. On the St. Louis side, it's such a different debate now on that left back side, isn't it? Because it really feels like it could be anybody's shot at any given point. You could say at this. I mean, if we see Anthony Markanich start this game, it's a fair thing to say that he's won the spot. But
I mean,
I don't think he's won the spot yet. So my starting 11 is Roman Berkey, Nicholas Dewar, not Josh Yarrow, Kyle Hebert, Tim Parker, Thomas Totland, Chris Durkin, Tomas Ostrak, Celio Pompeu, Indiana Vassilev, Alm, and Klaus. It might be a 4-4-2, might be a 4-2-3-1, but and I'm probably going to get bit for not having AZ in after as much as I talked about him. And as much as Carnell talked about staying with that. So our consensus after we talked to Santi probably will have AZ in there. Alm I want to see in there for sure. And I think Klaus still finds his way into this lineup.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna differ from you, but not a lot. Yeah, well, I just want to make the Markanich argument, because I wanted to make this exact same argument last week. Is like, when are we going to admit that Markanich has won the job? And I was there last week because I think he's already won it. I think we were a little bit wide-eyed because Dewar was in Europe.
Yep.
And I think we were wide-eyed looking at his price tag. But we have
Yeah.
to think about, I've been thinking this for so long. We have to think about when he was bought. He wasn't, it was, it was the winter window, right? Which is not, it's harder to buy. And he was a fullback, which is harder to find, a left back at that. And so I think his price was a little bit elevated because of when and how we bought him compared to Marcanic, which was just a great deal, a diamond in the rough. But I'm just going to say that I don't think he's viewed much differently than Marcanic by the front office and by Carnell, in my opinion. So I'm going to say Marcanic has won the job and is going to get time until he needs a rest. So continue with Marcanic, not Jarl, Hebert again, Parker, Totland. I'm good with Durkin and Ostrak. But I think I will repeat what they did last week because I think I thought Alm looked great, and I think Indy still wins it over Pompeu. So I'll say Indy and Alm, AZ at the 10, and Klaus up top. I will give that a caveat that, put Sam in sooner if they're bunkering. Please. I was furious that Sam wasn't in at the 60th minute. I don't understand why he wasn't. Yeah. It was so incredibly obvious what Dallas was going to do in the second half. And it did change as the game went on, to be fair to Carnell. But I mean, I don't see why you don't put Sam in the 60th minute when they're just going to sit back and wait for you. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So I don't usually go off and say something terrible and mean like that, but I think it was warranted in this situation, and, prove me wrong. And then I'll take it back. What do you think?
The tough thing is, how do you change up too much from a 27 shot outburst?
That's a good point.
So I can easily see that being run back, whether you keep Marcanic in, you have Indy on the left, Alm on the right, AZ in the middle, and then Klaus up top. I do like the way that Indy and Alm performed opposite of each other. Indy had a lot of crosses, left-footed, left side, vastly different angle. So he's not going to be inverted when he's on the left side as opposed to the right. I love that. Alm was getting in behind the lines a whole lot. So I think those two complement each other well on the left and right sides. So, I'm not going to go back on my word, but I'm going to say I would not be surprised to see last week's lineup repeated.
My favorite pass, the cutback pass from Indy. He tried a few of those, and I think more of those need to be tried in this situation we're in. That's it from us. Oh, quickly, what's your prediction, Matt?
I'm going to go. I'm going to say we have an outburst, and I'll just say 3-0.
Oh gosh, okay, well done. I'm going to say 2-1. I think Driussi's going to get one, and then or an assist at most. So, but I think City will win. That's it from us, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Flyover Footy on the Big 550 KTRS, presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. Check out our podcast, everyone. It's going to be a really good wind down tonight. So please do check out our podcast. Stick with us for the second half. Otherwise, again, thanks for listening on the radio. We'll talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye. Okay. Boy, rough start for me, but it got better.
Rounded into form.
Yeah, I suppose so. Better to finish well than start.
That's right.
Perfectly. Yep.
All right. Be right back, and we'll continue the wind down. If you're joining us on Instagram, Facebook, X, or YouTube, feel free to drop a comment in your chat, and we will get to it in the wind down. We are going to be talking about the new MLS roster rules. We'll be talking about some Next Pro rumors that have surfaced. Might touch on a lawsuit that has implications for foreign games played in the U.S., but we will try to keep our Tumblr talk to a minimum. I say that with Phil not here, though, of course.
And do you want to get straight into roster? Anything you want to say that you missed in the first half, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Nah, we
got to most of it.
I did. I managed most of it.
Even with my thoughts, my many thoughts.
I've gotten good at talking quickly for some reason.
No, I know why. You're motivated to get your stuff in.
That's fair. That's fair.
I don't. No, that was not negative in any way. It's you got to talk fast when you're surrounded by guys like me, and when there's 4 of us, it's tough. It's tough. Cool. Well, we'll go right into the roster rules.
Yeah, let's do it.
I imagine it'll take most of the time. We'll have to save some for.
Feel free to interrupt
Yeti.
me at any point too if you have a good stopping spot or a question, and if you need anything clarified, because clarity is important for this conversation.
I feel like these are pretty easy though compared to the last several, but I may be wrong. We'll see if I get proven wrong. I'm going to let you go, and we'll find out the
Sounds
hard
good.
way. Here we go. Welcome everyone to the wind down. I see you have your Zwickle.
It's becoming a tradition now. Maybe that's the problem.
I don't usually share what I'm drinking, but when I went to Charleston, I just went to a liquor store bodega down the road. We stayed in the city, which I recommend. It was nice. Someone was like, "You have to get Edmunds Oast Brewing Company," and I got an IPA and I got a blonde ale. It's the best blonde ale I've had in my life. The IPA is delicious as well. So look up Edmunds Oast.
Shout out to Edmunds.
Charleston. Oh my! I don't usually shout out breweries. That was just so incredibly good. So, cheers, sir.
Cheers.
Cheers to roster rules. We've got more, Matt. We got rid of some, maybe.
We love our roster rules on
top.
Footy. Yeah, we love talking roster rules. And this week was a big week for it. We heard rumors. We heard that there would be some mid-season changes, mid-season updates that are largely driven by Inter Miami, Jorge Mas, and a collection of owners more recent to the league who wants to see the league expand their spending, especially in the lead up to the World Cup coming in 2026 and all the visibility that our domestic league has and will have. Who's the president of FIFA? Gianni
Infantino, yes.
Infantino, that's right, Infantino. He made an appearance at the MLS Board of Governors meeting where these rules were being voted on. So I think that's an important side note to what some of these new roster rules mean. And it's not going everywhere. It's not exploding everything. It's not starting from scratch. It's not getting rid of allocation money. Well, quite the opposite, actually. But there were some significant changes. And I think it's important to understand context of these changes, explaining what they mean, and you can kind of read between the lines on how they might affect City. And we'll probably posit how we think they might affect City directly. But the first change is relating to the designated players and the under 22 initiative. Previously, teams with 3 senior designated players could have just 1 U22 player. Teams with 2 senior DPs and 1 young DP, or what they call a max TAM player, which is like a Roman Berkey, where they're making the maximum amount of targeted allocation money. If you had 2 DPs and one of them, you could have up to 3 U22s. So the U22 spot was directly tied to the amount of designated players you have. Under the new rules, teams can choose. They can either have 3 DPs and 3 U22 players, or they can have 2 DPs and 4 U22 players, plus $2 million in general allocation money. This is a fascinating change because it doesn't quite decouple the U22s from the designated player, which we kind of expected them to do. Really thought that there would be a lot more. You can choose what you want to do, but now you still have ties. You have 3 DPs and 3 U22s, or 2 DPs, 4 U22s, and $2 million in GAM. It offers more flexibility to a lot of teams that are building their rosters beyond these top tier players. And there are a few teams in MLS. I think there's only 4 or 5 teams currently with 3 designated players. So for those few teams, it unlocks 2 other U22 spots. For St. Louis City, it unlocks an extra U22, but the biggest implication is you're given $2 million in general allocation money. And this is where I see St. Louis City taking advantage of this. Lutz has already said he's not looking to sign a third DP. So if you're not looking to sign a third DP, then you're getting this $2 million in extra general allocation money in addition to the ability to sign more U22s. St. Louis City only has one U22 player on their roster right now. It's Chris Durkin. Uh, the best part about this is what the $2 million in GAM means to teams in general. And it's important to look at the overall salary cap allocation money per year buckets to really understand and get why this is so huge. In 2024, the salary cap for MLS is $5.47 million. Each team is given 2.585 million in general allocation money and 2.4 million in TAM, bringing the total available spend on rosters in MLS outside of designated players to 10.455 million. So let me restate that with general allocation money each year, every team is given 2.585 million. What this change does is it gives teams who have only 2 designated players and up to 4 U22s, it gives those teams 2 million more in general allocation money. That's about 90% of the total teams are given in any given year.
Doubled.
It's almost doubling the amount of GAM that you get. And what that lets you do is spend more up and down your roster. General allocation money can be used for a wide array of purposes, all specific to MLS, yes, but it can be used to trade for players in MLS. You can trade GAM for players. It can be used to buy down players' salaries across the board, and it can overall be used to raise your overall spend from the cap. Transfer fees, salaries, they can all buy them down to fit into salary caps. You can sign more high dollar players who aren't DPs with this GAM. So it allows teams to spend almost double what they were in just the GAM portion.
Yeah, and I mean it does make that is the biggest change for City. I agree with you. That designated team thing, putting $2 million toward the middle to bottom of the roster is massive. That's something that Vermes has been calling for like 3-4 years now, and at SKC even. And you talk about, who was it that just lost to New England? Just lost to a Mexican team in CCC. And, we heard it again. I was basically playing against 11 DPs. So,
Yep.
This is going to stick. This is going to speak to that partially. Of course, also on the other hand, I mean, we can't gloss over the fact that, people like teams like Inter Miami, LAFC, LA Galaxy, the big spenders are really going to enjoy having either another DP or another U22 to work with here.
Yeah, the U22s can't go overlooked. St. Louis hasn't taken advantage of them yet, but U22s have no restrictions in terms of their acquisition costs. They can't make more than the maximum budget charge, which is around $673, I think, $1,000. But by having no limit on their acquisition costs, you can sign a player with a transfer fee of $8 million if you wanted to, as long as you weren't paying him more than the max budget charge. And to have now 4 slots in addition to 2 DPs plus $2 million, that could be huge if you identify that talent and you bring them in. Now, St. Louis still has yet to prove that they are willing to spend that kind of money to really make these spots meaningful. Chris Durkin being our only U22 player, acquiring for $300,000 in GAM and 2 players is what it is, but the potential is there. And I think this adds tools to Lutz's belt when it comes to who he would be looking for, and what his capabilities can be, especially.
Yeah, and Santi and I feel like it's near criminal the fact that we haven't used those U22s in a meaningful way, because it is a cheat, right? It's a way to get more value than other teams may be getting for the dollar, or more bang for the buck is an easy way to say that. And it's just not something City has done. It's not something you want to force, right? And I do think just having Lutz Pfannenstiel is a cheat, and that's really similar to that U22 discount in a way on the cap. So, I'm not upset by any means, but I do feel like there's money being left on the table potentially if we're able to find some players that are under the age of 22 that are worthy of a lot of money. But I'm really happy about this $2 million. Actually, first, Matt, there are a couple more changes, right? The second buyout, did you cover that? Let's cover that before I start talking about other things.
Sure. Yeah, there's 2 other changes that are kind of a big deal. We can run through them real quick and then we'll circle back. The 2 buyouts per season. The rule change is that previously MLS had one single contract buyout that a team could do per season. And this is essentially a do-over. It's Chicago Fire had taken advantage of this and they wish they had a second one recently, but the idea is that you sign a player to a multi-year contract, for instance, and they're underperforming very early and very often. And so things just aren't working out. You're not stuck with them for 4 years. You can buy them out during the season. And so the DP is wiped off the books, the salary is wiped off the books, and you could just have that spot over, have that money in your salary cap as a do-over. Now teams will have 2 per season available.
Hmm.
This is huge because of the salary cap restrictions. Those numbers that I just mentioned, they're pretty tight and they're really small. And we know that the teams don't have much flexibility. There's no wiggle room for mistakes that teams can really play around with. You have to hit and hit often if you're going to be successful up and down your roster. So this gives teams a little more flexibility to maybe take a chance or to reward them for taking chances on big spends. Things don't work out, and so you have to buy them out. They're free to go, and you can move on. You can find another. You're not stuck for multiple years because you made a bad call 2 years ago. This is a big thing for teams, especially that are bigger spenders and may not have the best track record, or may just want to be more speculative in some of their signings, and they're not multi-year hindrances on your overall roster build. Because if you build, because of MLS building their entire clubs around designated players, St. Louis City has too, let's be honest. Klaus and Leuven are our anchors, and if you build your club around those 2 players, imagine if Klaus hadn't scored 10 goals last year. Imagine if Leuven had not done what he did last year, any one of those players, and we'd be stuck with them for 4 years. That's horrendous for MLS teams. And the ability to have a second buyout per year, it can flip a team's fortunes around almost on a dime.
I'm glad you talked about that, because I guess I saw that and I was like, oh, I didn't realize there was a limit to one buy down of salary. Like, what people were speculating, was Berkey going to be a DP, or were they going to buy down a salary? That's not what we're talking about here. I assumed that's what that was.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize there's a lot of leeway where if you get the wrong guy, you can just kind of pay yourself to get it erased from the cap.
Very good differentiation there. This is a buyout, not a buy down.
Thank you.
Buy downs are used for targeted allocation money, basically. So you're buying down the real salary that a player is being paid so that they fit in the books in a meaningful way. So Roman Berkey makes about $1.6 million right now, and we're buying him down so that he hits the salary books in a certain way. We're using targeted allocation money to buy his salary down, so he's not a designated player. That's completely different from a buyout, which is basically saying you have a 4-year, for example, you have a 4-year contract, you're making $2 million a year. We're going to pay you, we're going to buy you out of your contract, legitimately pay you what you're due, buy you out, ship you out of here, and then we're taking your spot and using it for somebody else. Yeah, it does come with a hit to the pocketbooks, but if you're talking about being competitive and really wanting to make your team be the best that they can, and teams do this all the time. The article in The Athletic did say that most teams in MLS have already used their buyout this season. Many teams have. So this isn't something abstract that may benefit some teams. This is going to give teams a lot of options in who else they can move off the books who might be underperforming in a key spot for their team.
Good stuff. Sometimes it's good to have a guy that's not a details guy, so we can all have our learning moments together. That was good. You guys can benefit from my I don't know what to call my flightiness. Let's call it that.
Flightiness and flyover. Hey, people need me. People need you. How about that?
There you go. Perfect. Let's talk about the increasing the convertible GAM. This is one that I missed. I've been with you up until this point. So
yeah, this is something that actually would have benefited St. Louis City very directly, very recently. Under current rules, MLS teams can only convert up to $1.215 million of any transfer into general allocation money, meaning it's directly reabsorbed into what you can reinvest into your team. Nico Gioacchini is the example. St. Louis sold him for $2 up to $4 million with add-ons. We could only convert 1.215 million of that into general allocation money to reinvest back in our team. The rest of it it's all salary cap related. Like, we can't just take that $2 million and say, okay, we're going to put all of it back into our team, because you're playing in those 3 buckets of money. You're playing into the salary cap, GAM, and TAM. So if you
Where does that money go? Where does that leftover money go?
the team has it. I mean, they can upgrade facilities, they can do what they need to do business
Whoa.
side, but they can't reinvest it into players. That's the thing.
Whoa.
And so
Okay.
now the new rule is that teams will be able to convert up to $3 million per year in transfer or loan revenue into GAM. So it
Mm.
changes it. It's not just more money, but it frames it entirely differently. So no longer tied to a single transfer or loan. It's per year. It goes from 1.215 million per loan that can be converted into GAM into up to 3 million per year in total transfers. So this affects teams in how often and how expensive their transfers are. So if you're increasing this in this way, it helps teams who have, I would say, one or few big sales per year. So it ensures that teams get rewarded for how much transfer revenue they're really bringing in versus the overall number of total transfers. In the future, it was talked about in the Athletic article. In the future, this may need to change depending on the volume and
Yeah.
the price that teams are making, right? So it could be very outdated. It could be something they have to continuously update. But right now, it's looking at St. Louis City as the example. Right now, we've only sold one player, and we sold him for a pretty good amount, but we were
Yeah.
capped so hard on what we could convert back into our team through GAM. Now, if Nico Gioacchini and let's say Nico Gioacchini and Sam Adeniran were both sold in a given year, and they were both sold for Nico was sold for 2, Sam was sold for 2, we'd be able to convert up to 3 million of that into GAM. So total between all players we sell, up to 3 million.
But what if Gioacchini, pardon me, oh my goodness. What if Gioacchini gets all those incentives and he makes that full 4 million? It looks like he's not going to, but there's a good chance of promotion, so we might get a lot of it.
It's
I mean, and then we sell someone else, we don't get that money
well,
converted into
Gioacchini's
GAM.
Gioacchini's deal is over and done with. It's under the current rules, and so we
Oh, okay.
no matter if it's 2, no matter if it escalates up to 4, if Como gets promoted, things like that, we're only able to reinvest 1.215 million back into our team through GAM.
Yeah, but the incentives don't hit until the end of the season, Matt. I think it should be
It's
included.
it's it's just a moving line here. It's just a moving line. But
Man, that's
any
rough for
this
me,
it,
man.
it's something to
It's
keep in
it's
mind
so
because
it's so funny
Sam
to me that you can sell someone for $2-4 million and only be able to use some of it. It's wild to me that you can only use some of it. It disincentivizes people to sell for more than a certain amount. It's like, well, this guy is worth more than 2 million, so why would I sell him? I can't use
well,
this money again. And now it's 3 million. That's better, but like why would you sell someone like Leuven who might be worth more like 4 or 8 million if you're not going to get that money back? That's crazy. Maybe he'll
it
never be sold.
it could also explain why we're seeing a kind of a sweet spot of sale prices, right?
Mhm.
Teams aren't incentivized to say, okay, we've got a player who their market value is now $3 million. We're not they're not incentivized to say we're going to hold on to him until we can get 6 million for him,
Mm.
because up until this rule change, you could only put in 1.215 back into your team. Yeah, you're making money as a business. So all that extra money, like I don't know what I'd
It's
like to think it's
helpful.
not going into pockets, but it's going back into the team. It's just not going back into the product on the field, which
Yeah.
is that's the thing we care about, right? We care about reinvesting into player acquisition costs. And we sold Gioacchini, so now we have money to reinvest into bringing in other players like Cedric Tukert or whoever the other 5 strikers that are on our list might be. We have extra money to play with. In the future, if we sell Sam Adeniran for 2 million, we can reinvest the full 2 million back into our player pool.
And it can go toward DPs, right? So whatever doesn't hit the cap, anything above that is just cash thrown in, right? So I imagine you
Mhm.
can use it for anything.
It's true. Yeah, that's the other thing with the transfers is, I mean, that's kind
Even
of
U22s, right? Which only
implicit. Yeah.
200,000 hits, but anything outside of that, Gioacchini money can go toward
That's a
that.
good thing to keep in mind too. We're talking about, do we have a team that's willing to spend?
Yeah.
Well, you might have a team that is willing to spend if they're able to let the team be self-sustaining, so to speak,
Mhm.
where you're not necessarily asking Carolyn Kindle to pour in $4
Right.
million to acquire a DP. You're saying, all right, we've played now, and this is a future hypothetical, but we've played now for 2 or 3 years. We're selling 2 or 3 players for a total of $6 million. We can't reinvest all 6 million into our player pool in the costs in GAM, but now we have an additional up to $6 million that we just have as a club. And
Mhm.
if there is a way to reinvest that in the sense of bringing in a DP and paying for that extra transfer fee cost. So you're right on that. And that's a good thing to keep in mind on other ways that our transfers can really be reinvested into the player pool if you're willing to spend in that specific way.
Yeah, I might have overreacted there for a second, but
No, I'm glad you brought that in because I wasn't going to mention that.
even spending it on the academy, that's good. That's money well spent in the long run. So
Infrastructure and such. Yeah.
yeah,
Those are the
new
three
coaches,
rules,
new
though. So
scouting.
yeah, those are the three rules that were announced that will be taking place. It has a Major League Soccer Players Association vote to pass, but they're expecting to be able to start this for the summer transfer window. And so, for instance, the $2 million in GAM that teams are getting if they only have two DPs, it's expected that this year teams will get 1 million because it's going into effect halfway through the season. So to recap, the three new roster rules that are going into effect for MLS are designated players, U22s. There are now two options that teams have when they're selecting how they want to organize and build their team. You can either have two DPs and four U22s, or you can have two DPs, U22s, and $2 million in GAM, or you can have three DPs and three U22s. Pick your poison, choose your own adventure here and see how you want to build your team. The other two roster rules that were updated are adding a second player buyout clause for each team. This is buy out, not buy down. So this is truly buying a player out of his contract, getting rid of them and able to fill their slot with somebody else. Teams now have two of those. And then increasing the convertible GAM from transfers, going from about 1.215 per transfer to 3 million per year.
Most of this doesn't really apply to City, right? Because U22 is not a thing so far. Two DPs, no plans for a third. It makes me think, if we had Firmino, that would be a different story, right? We'd be like, oh, this is really helpful to us. But
Yeah.
Firmino didn't happen. The 2 million paying down of GAM is pretty huge, I would say, for any team in the league. So that is nice. I think we've covered that pretty well.
I think it's also about realizing that we're just starting our second year in the league too. And yeah, I would have loved us to fill up our roster slots. I think I would love us to have filled up all of our roster slots on our first year and take full advantage. But Jason, our friend Jason Goodbody in chat on our live stream really says something very simple that we need to keep in mind. City needs to pay down debt as well. They invested private money into everything that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Facilities, infrastructure, players. So it is not it's not a crazy thought. I mean, it's not even like you can't necessarily be too upset if you really take a step back at the fact that they need to be a little budget conscious for a period of time to work on the books and let the player pool manage itself to an extent. Like you're spending what you're spending. You have Lutz being smart with who he's acquiring and what he's paying for it. You're still bringing in players. We signed two players we brought in the offseason. How huge have Durkin and Totland have they been? I mean, you're talking about still
Massive.
making meaningful moves, but at the same time, all of these changes, yeah, they might not be in effect now, maybe not even for this summer transfer window, but it's still things we have now that we can forecast and put on the board as we now have an extra U22 player that we can target. So the big board that Lutz has in his war room with his staff, that is now bigger. The pool of money that he can use with GAM is now bigger. And so that's meaningful for City, even if as we sit here in April and the transfer window for MLS is about to close here in the next less than 2 weeks. It might not be right now, but it will impact City. We will eventually, at some point, fill these slots, and we just need to make those slots count.
I agree. And I want to expand on that. I mean, agree. JB Goodbody, like Matt read, City needs to pay down debt. They spent a lot of money. I don't think they're doing enough, and maybe they are behind the scenes. Who knows? But they need to be demanding things that help teams like us, teams like Philadelphia Union, teams like Red Bull, teams that would really benefit from a deeper roster, right? We expend a lot of energy. We rotate our rosters a lot. It used to be Red Bull 2 would send like 5, 6, 7, 8 players up per year to Red Bull proper, just so they could get just legs, right? Like young legs running their butts off in that system. That's the kind of thing that benefits those 3 clubs that I just mentioned. And it's just like Gigliani and even like Carolyn Kindle backing it with the money, saying, I put money into this system and all you're doing is catering to Inter Miami. We need this like caucus of academy leaning people who lean on their academies, people who lean on rotation, people who lean on their reserve sides, demanding that rosters be expanded. And that should go hand to hand with other things. But to me, as a City fan, the fact that we can't call up Johnny Klein, who's already got some goals this year, more than twice this year, or 4 if you do it right, it kills me. Absolutely kills me. The fact that we can't pull up Wenzel on a whim, because honestly, what is, him and Hebert, him and Yarrow, like what is the gap there? It's not massive. And even if Hebert gets tired or hurt again, or Yarrow and Hebert are slightly hurt, we could have called up Wenzel to be on the bench at the very least if we weren't worried about him only having 2 or 4 call-ups this season. It's unacceptable to me that they didn't expand the rosters, that it wasn't demanded to MLS that they allow more roster call-ups in MLS and non-MLS, right? Like, let's look at Open Cup. If we're talking about game congestion, talking about Leagues Cup coming up, let us call up our guys that are down there ready to play, that have fresh legs. They're young legs, right? They have quality that may or may not be ready yet, but they could do something for our team. They could eat up some minutes in something like Leagues Cup or even Open Cup if we were a part of it this year. So, and I think City would love that. I really do think City would really love that, and I hope they're rallying for that in the future, because I'm going to be ticked if we get up to this off season and we get more money being allowed to be spent, even up and down the roster. I'm appreciative of that $2 million. It's not enough. It's nowhere near enough. We need more roster freedom, and I don't want to hear anything about congestion anymore ever again unless they're going to expand the rosters. It's ridiculous and it's unacceptable. MLS is just full of absolute crap on all of that, and I mean, it's obvious, right? And it's just that every time they announce more stuff, it's just like, this is the most obvious, easiest thing that needs to happen, and they just refuse to do it.
I'm just impressed. There's my rant. I'm just impressed we made it this far into the pod before you said MLS is full of crap.
Yeah, right.
But to that point, I made a point
to that point, because there's another one we got to hit before we leave here. But yeah,
on that one, I did make a point that back in the Open Cup conversation, before it was announced all the teams are pulling out and what MLS is choosing to do with the Open Cup, a lot of the arguments against things like expanding the rosters or changing the rules so that you could have unlimited roster call-ups for non-league matches, the argument against that is, oh, well, that would require player association approval. Like that, there's a process. You can't just do that.
Yeah, this is a good one.
What are we talking about right now? We just got done listing 3 massive changes to the roster rules that massive in air quotes, because it might not seem massive to a lot of people, but I still claim I will stand by that they're big and impactful, but they require players association approval. And MLS is all too eager to do that, because whether it's Infantino, who is there from FIFA, who's trying to convince them to do more to make your league better and more attractive in the lead up to the World Cup, or Jorge Mas trying to build Inter Miami, or whatever it ended up being that forced this particular set of issues, it's possible. If you want to do it, if you have that as your goal, there's nothing stopping you. It's MLS's own playing field. Like, if they want to do something that requires PA approval, this shows that they're willing and able to do it quickly and make the implementation during the current season.
Yeah, and to kind of speak against my own thoughts there, I'm really glad that there's PA approval required, because if we just start unlimiting, taking away limits on loans and call ups, then kids start getting taken advantage of, right? I mean, should we be able to call up Wenzel on his current salary with MLS Next Pro? Should we be able to call up Klein without limits on his MLS Next Pro salary? No. The answer is no. Like, I think there also needs to be, a salary tied to, you can call up twice or four if it's 2-2 on non-MLS competitions and two MLS competitions. And then if you do more than that, there needs to be a dollar amount attached to, that player needs to get a bonus or a raise based on their usage for sure. So we need to protect the players. The PA is there for a reason. They do their job. I think they're a wonderful organization. I think they do their job well. And they're even pushing for, what is our next conversation here, is to simplify the rules, right? I said it at the top. Some of these rules have been somewhat simplified. They've been improved. I will say this is an improvement. Absolutely. I can't be fully salty filled, JB, good buddy. But, I will say that the end goal here is to simplify things, right? To take away any limits on how much money you can put towards GAM. We'll just maybe get rid of GAM, or let us just spend our money however we want. That is a necessary change that needs to happen at some point. And the last thing I'll say is, again, I just keep wondering if it's going to happen under someone like Don Garber, who's not a soccer guy. He's just an NFL guy trying to make MLS as big as it can possibly be, which is a good thing in some ways. But we need to evolve into it needs to be the world game at some point. MLS needs to be respected, not just for the players we bring in, not just for the money we spend or the limits we put on, being demoted in any way. We need to become a soccer league that's respected by the world, and it's going to need to include getting rid of all these limitations. It just needs to be free, and it'll be fun. We've talked about over and over how much fun it would be to take away the limitations on all the interesting roster styles, all the roster builds we could see going forward. It needs to happen, and this did nothing. It took the cherry on top, and then it put more toppings on top of that, didn't it?
I think the only realistic time that we're going to be seeing a complete overhaul would be after the CBA expires in 2027. So we're stuck in the system that we're in until the World Cup and just after.
Well,
And
no, but you just said that the Players Association needed to approve this. Why would the CBA, if we just saw those changes, why would the CBA keep that from happening in the future? Do you think it would?
I guess it depends on how much the players want to really fight. The last CBA was a little the last couple CBA conversations and negotiations were difficult. The last one was
No.
during COVID, where the league
Yeah.
almost unilaterally they claimed force majeure, if you remember that, during COVID,
Mhm.
and almost forced the players back to the table to say
Yeah.
we need to renegotiate our current deal. Um, it was parlayed in the articles more as the Players Association they just need it's rubber stamping it. And so we're trying to provide more money to um, better serve the players almost. So give the teams more flexibility, but it also does more for the players in certain regards. And I don't know the level of change that meets the need to completely renegotiate the CBA, but it does sound like the level of changes that they reached is at a point where it needs approval, but it fits within the bounds of the CBA itself, because you're not the way that they orchestrated this additional GAM is not pursuant to the yearly increases in the salary cap, the GAM, the TAM, the overall discretionary spending. And so there are things in the CBA that are very prescribed and will increase year over year as negotiated, but
Mhm.
it is noteworthy to this conversation that the specific changes, they're not introducing new types of players to the roster rules. They're not introducing yearly changes to the amount of GAM that teams are receiving based on those increases. And they're not even introducing new concepts in general. So everything that we're talking about are changes to existing structures.
Mhm.
DP's U22s, a bucket of GAM. The extra buyout where they had one, they're now going to have two, and then changing the formula for how much GAM you can convert from a transfer fee. It's all taking those existing things that are in the CBA and in the roster rules, and it's adjusting them.
I think it would be an interesting question to the Players Association if MLS were to desire to get rid of TAM GAM DPs and just have a flat fee, luxury tax perhaps. What rules would that violate in the CBA? That'd be a good question for both the PA Players Association and for someone like Don Garber.
Well,
I'm curious what it would be.
I think the player that we would want to ask is probably, I don't know if he would know, but I think it's Tim Parker.
Is he the player rep?
I believe Tim Parker is our player rep to the NYCPA.
Okay.
If I remember, I don't have notes in front of me, but if I remember from last year, I'm almost positive that it was Parker.
We got to remember that next time Parker's shows up.
Yeah, hopefully if I speak out of turn and I'm wrong, somebody tell me if you remember hearing otherwise, but I believe I heard from Tim Parker last year when we had conversations about CBA related or Players Association that it was him.
Good stuff. And the CBA is not something I thought of, so that's actually a really good thing to think about going forward. Should we talk about Yeti Cups, Matt? Did we cover everything?
I'd rather talk about these next pro rumors.
You don't want to talk about the Yeti Cup?
Gosh, I mean, what we can talk about the Yeti Cup.
I'm just kidding, for real.
I didn't expect. I expected. Here's what I didn't expect. I didn't expect as much conversation and initial fervor outside of the expense of it. $80 is an expensive mug. $80 is expensive for anything. But I was kind of surprised and almost taken aback when people started talking about how City is trying to make money as opposed to keep people safe. That was, I think that's a good example of let's read the first paragraph of a press release and make our entire judgment on that when you have an entire wall of text that is probably going to benefit you to read if you're going to enter into a discourse on social media. Because it took a little bit of reading to get to it. They buried the lead quite well to their own discredit. But I get it. It's a corporate deal. You know, you have probably partnership things that you have to get out. You made a deal with Yeti. Yeti's a huge company with very expensive products, and you have to say things to tout right off the bat. But if you're getting feedback in your game day surveys, especially during the summer months, that say we need more free water. We need water to be available. Let us bring our own stuff. And you're going to allow compostable cups around water stations throughout the stadium. And that's a part of this initiative. You might want to include that a little higher up than like the third to last paragraph, because that immediately shifted the narrative as far as my timeline went on Thursday when this was released. Because once I read through, because I was at my other job, my real job, when the press release came out. And so I didn't have a knee-jerk reaction right away. But once I read the press release and then I read the comments, it was pretty clear what had happened. And so there's multiple.
So we can bring our own compostable cups. I read it as they would be provided.
They're provided. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And so like our friend Mario of Santos and the Shoot Bahoys, like justifiably had questions about everybody's upset because they can't bring in their own reusable water bottle. That's like a fundamental thing here. But the other thing is, okay, teams might not have great track records of operationally making this work, like the flow of the stadium, making sure there are enough compostable cups, making sure that they're more than like a little 2-ounce Dixie cup type of thing, and how that's going to work. So yeah, there's questions because we haven't seen it, but this is one of those things where the team is saying in the press release, we're giving you free cups of water especially during the summer heat. So the concept of this mug, $80 mug that you can bring in to the stadium, fill with soda, water, whatever you want to fill it with, is preventing you from keeping people safe and hydrated. That's simply false. That's not a thing. You could be concerned about the ability to, you have to wait in a line or in a queue, or they might run out of cups. Like, yeah, like let's see what they actually come up with operationally when we're in the stadium. So I can say I could be understand those kind of concerns, but they're doing something. And if you
So
don't want to buy if you don't want to buy the mug, don't buy the mug. But if you do want to buy the mug and you're a season ticket holder, especially, or you go to a lot of City or City 2 games because it works for both,
right,
there's value to be
massive.
had in addition to the fact that you just might like things with the City crest on it.
But you did the math, right? What's a soda with the aluminum cup?
The app has $9.29 for buy ahead
Thank you.
refillable fountain soda cups. So
So
if you're
8 games and you win. I see, and this is where I come in. Like, I don't see the problem here. It, $9 for a soda is crazy. $80 for a Yeti cup in itself is insane. Sure. But I mean, I guess it's this like creating a false narrative in a way. Like a soda is in no way worth $9, right? So that in itself is a fallacy. But if you can just buy an $80 Yeti cup that you can use for the rest of your life, and you can come out slightly ahead at the end of the season on soda. I was gonna buy one and have my boys share it
right.
and refill it. That's fine. Um, I loved this idea from the start because I'm just all I thought was dollars and cents. I thought, oh, I'll buy one. I don't mind buying a Yeti cup. I lose mine constantly, and in the end, I will come out ahead. My wife will even drink the soda.
Yeah.
I'm happy. I don't see why people are so pissed. I do get it if you just think this is an $80 Yeti. Yeah, that's unacceptable. If you're just talking about a Yeti and if you're
Yeah,
talking about
Yetis
a
Yetis are
$9
like
soda, like that's unacceptable all on their own. Absolutely. But it is the world we live in. It's every stadium on the planet or in the
yeah.
United States, I should say,
Yeah,
actually. So I don't know. It feels like people are entering and leaving the world of capitalism and sports at will, right? And just not considering what we'd be paying otherwise.
yeah. The there are branches to this conversation that are occurring where people are spawning off into the overall price of things in stadiums.
Sure.
And there are conversations to be had all over the place, but like if you isolate it to just this one thing, I think I it's fascinating in why it was just such a knee-jerk reaction and fervor. I think because of the amount of feedback that the team had um to this need and want. Like, and it probably varied. I mean, I'm sure people wanted at some levels something to be able to bring in and carry out, and they could have access to the sodas, access to the water, and some people wanted to bring their own thing. Some people just wanted something. Some people wanted. I mean, there are probably altruistic feedback out there where people just wanted people to be safe. People just wanted to make sure people can be hydrated, themselves and others. And there's so much that's being accomplished with this, but it's also not in the exact way that people wanted. Like there's the component of you are still selling those individual cups that have unlimited refills for the game that you're at. And people that might be valuable to people who only go to one single game or a couple of games. There are people who we're not talking about season ticket holders. We're talking about you might just come to a single game and that's your experience for the year. You're not going to necessarily get value from this Yeti tumbler. Not to say you won't want it because it's still a nice tumbler with City Crest on it. That has its own conversation. But at the same time, separate from the Yeti thing, you have these single use cups that people are still going to have fountain drinks. And I made the point earlier that you can't just let people bring in their own random tumbler because they're going to abuse it. They're going to go refill it with water and soda and lemonade, and it more often than not it's going to happen. I don't know. I can't quantify it, but you're naive if you don't think that that's going to happen, and so that undermines the free single, not the free, but the single cups with their refillable, free self serve. And I looked around at least to like Atlanta and a few others. I mean, there's a Venn diagram that could be made here, where you have teams that have these self-serve fountain soda stations, teams that allow you to bring in external stuff, and then teams that have these zero waste sustainability initiatives. Like that's kind of the three things we're really talking about here,
Hmm.
because City has, in some ways, for this conversation, backed themselves into a corner on what fans are saying. I think it's a fine corner to be in because it's a sustainability corner, right? It's zero waste, and everything that you're doing is coming from a foundation of zero waste. Immediately taking off plastic water bottles. Sorry, Cardinals fans, for what you get to bring into Busch Stadium. That's not what City's doing. Like, period, end of story. At a foundational level, that's not what City's doing. So then you immediately take plastic water bottles off the table. You're going to reusable personal water bottles that you're bringing in the stadium. I don't know what the security concerns are for that. I don't know how the scanners work, if they're going to be set off, if it's going to cause lines to be a little longer for a lot of people who are going to start bringing in their own stuff because you have to check them. That's one thing. That's one other thing. I don't know how they're going to work with the tumblers that they're getting from Yeti, but I assume that by having one cohesive thing, there's going to be some better flow to it. And so you're starting to get to the point where you're sustainable, you're offering these self-serve fountain drinks, and you want to satisfy people bringing something in and out while at the same time having hydration stations available. Like, they're hitting the nail on all of these. There's probably room for improvement somewhere, but the fact that $80 in and of itself is sticker shock. But everything you said, as far as the season long value with both City and City 2 and all these other initiatives that they're juggling, I still, at the end of the day, don't understand the fervor.
I love this. Like, Matt, we've talked about some like controversial things today, and now we're getting a million comments. It's my favorite. This is why we had to talk about it. I mean, I know what you like. Okay. Phil knows what you guys like to talk about. So let's read off some things here. Jennifer Brown has been killing it. She's my favorite here so far. They should have put it out at the very beginning of the season, made it more worth the price. Agree. That's a slight mess up there. All the team merch is expensive. So I don't know why people are shocked. Come on, people. And that's the hard part here. And Matt, everything you said, I'm with you. I agree. But again, you mentioned it earlier that it has this capitalist bend to it, right? Like it feels like, well, this was a deal with Yeti. We're going to make money in the end, or at least we're going to break even. And so I'm with you. Like, all of this is like mostly good. And I'm more worried about the waste than anything. So that's why I thought the Yeti Cup, I didn't even say that earlier, but the Yeti Cup is going to waste way less. I think the hard part for people is this because of ease of security, or is this like a capitalistic endeavor? And where does that fall when it comes to waste? And so I think people are having a hard time figuring that out. This is America. Like, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Marketing team, if you're listening, or if someone can say to the marketing team, this is where people are having a disconnect. Why can't I bring a plastic water bottle in, but now I can bring in this Yeti branded thing? Is it a security thing? Maybe it is. It makes sense to me. You can't hide a big Yeti thing, right? Yeah. You can hide a plastic bottle. It's fine. And lastly, I'll just say, when you listen to the City Voice with Seebeck, you talk about the thing that has blown my mind since day one, that I never understood how they got this to work, because no one is doing this in the United States. No sport is doing this in the United States. No stadium. The amount of local vendors that we have at City Park is insane. It is unheard of. We are so freaking lucky to have them. And I always wondered how they pulled it off, and Seebeck gave us the answer. The answer is, they made sure they got a lot of people coming in, right? A lot of sales, more sales than they'll ever get at their brick and mortar in one sitting ever, right? So that's one benefit. The other is they give them more profit, okay? And notice the prices aren't too crazy. They're a little high, okay? It's a stadium. We got really quality food coming in. So the stadium said, we'll take a hit with food in order to make this a wonderful experience for everybody. So I don't know, socialism fans, hit me up, because we're paying $9 a drink for an aluminum cup that's less wasteful. Makes me happy, but it's $9, right? That's a little ridiculous. We're not allowed to bring our plastic bottles in. We're not allowed to bring in random containers, maybe because of security, maybe. But if you're asking me to buy an $80 Yeti cup, then I'm going to make a better deal on based on the other circumstances available to me, whether they're good or they're bad or perfect. And I'm also going to get all these local vendors that City has said, I'm going to take less of a profit from, and then maybe I'm going to charge you a little bit too much for a soda. Maybe the jerseys cost a little bit too much for, a polyester shirt or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You got to think about it all. Okay. I'm very appreciative of the fact that we talked about the stadium was built on private money. I try not to forget that when I say, please buy a U22 player, please buy another DP, whatever. I try to be thankful. I try not to take it for granted, but I also don't take for granted all these vendor problems and things like that. So
Yeah.
just try to remember it all. I know some things cost a lot. We're getting a lot of cool food for a lot less than we should be, compared to the rest of the country.
Yeah, and one of the problems that I think my last thing I'll say is one of the problems with the discourse right now is people aren't sure how to frame this. And our conversation, I think, really gets to that. There's so many variables at play the city is juggling in addition to the just the underlying $80 tumbler, right? And it in the press release, it also said that this is the first of its kind refillable soda and water season long cup in sports. So this is breaking ground. This is setting the tone. Other teams are going to see this, see how successful they are in it in the sales, and not just day one comments, but I guess how things go from here. How did the compostable cups work when you were in the stadium, right? How did the flow work with this reusable thing? Overall sales, first of its kind. This was City stepping out, right? They took the feedback, they understood what people wanted, and they gave it to them in clearly ways that they weren't expecting. I would some of my friends texted me and they were saying legitimately, like this is not me making things up. Legitimately, people really surprised that City listened to some of their feedback. So I'm going to try to word this in a nice way, but don't feel like you're the main character at all times, right? I have opinions and perspectives that a lot of people do not share. Other people in what they're saying, we asked for this, we said this, we put this in our, you and your friends might have, but that does not mean it is the majority opinion. It may be, but it doesn't mean it is. So take a step back, think about all of the comments you're seeing, think about all of the different things that are both in the press release and that are other people are talking about, because the comments vary all over the place. If you want to get a good feel for how this is really going over, look at all of the different social media comments. I saw Facebook was pretty positive, Instagram was pretty negative, Twitter was all over the place on Thursday. And then you have people who just aren't on social media, but they're City fans. It's the silent maybe majority. And if these things sell out, you're probably going to have your answer right there.
I'm buying one. I'm just going to say it. Matt wanted to talk about MLS Next Pro drama. We have no time. I've ruined it for you all.
We'll get to it when there's real news, because there's rumors that MLS is trying to encourage every single Next Pro team to move to a market outside of their home team's home base, less than 100 miles away. And so I had to throw out on Twitter saying that it's less than Columbia, Missouri. Cape Girardeau might fit it. Columbia or Springfield, Illinois might fit it, but we'll talk about that when it's real.
I'm just gonna, little preview from my take. None of it matters. None of that matters.
No. And if any team has justification to stay right where they are, it's City.
Thank you. That's exactly how I feel. Not surprised, Matt. We're mind melding on that one. Every once in a while I try to think of a closer, because I'm terrible at closing this show out. And I think I've found one. I might stick with it. Let me know. If it's really bad, I won't do it again.
Sometimes they're abrupt, so let's go.
Yeah. This is going to be abrupt too, in a good way, I think. So first of all, thank you for making it here. I hope you enjoyed the nerdy talk. I hope you enjoyed the drama that I made sure that we covered today. But if you take one thing from tonight's show, it should be this. It should be Flyover Footy in no way endorses sneaking aluminum cups back into the stadium that you have bought at a previous game. That's it from us, everybody. Goodbye.